Welcome back, everyone. I was a great session from Twitter. I hope you guys all had a chance to see it. Really important stuff. As I mentioned, as I was chatting a little bit, kind of to kick off this session, in my house today is Freedom Day. It's the day the kids all go back to school. And I know some of the folks on this panel were echoing those sentiments. But coming up next, I want to introduce my good friend, Ann Goodman. We're so lucky to have Ann, who took some time out of her busy schedule to help us lead this group. I want to first also thank our friends at DoubleVerify who are underwriting the session today and underwriting our summit. They're our longest standing partner, and we love working with them. The term brand suitability is something that has been thrown around a lot in the first couple of comments, and this is going to be a deep dive. So Ann, take it away and let us know a little something about brand suitability and what it means.
Fabulous. Thank you, Rob. And hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Ann Goodman. I'm the founder of Ventures in Blockchain. That, amongst other things, looks at opportunities for increasing transparency and security in the ad supply chain. I'm thrilled to be with these folks for what I know is going to be a fascinating discussion on the balancing act that brands have to navigate to ensure that they appear in environments that are suitable for what they do and who they are. This discussion will, I know, peel back the questions this balancing act raises. And as an ex-BBC Worldwide folk and in a previous life a brand strategist, I've been focused on the increased value of advertising in the right place at the right time for many years now. But before we get into this, I'd like to have my panelists introduce themselves, as I think they can best do that. I therefore am going to hand it off to you guys to share a couple of words about yourself. That would be great. So let me first welcome Rebecca Sparks. Rebecca.
Hi, everyone. It's a slightly strange introduction because I can't see anyone, but I'm sure from my kitchen to yours, hi. It's great to be here. Yeah, just to kind of introduce who I am and what I do. I am a global strategy director at PhD, and I work with clients across pretty much every category, across all of their channels, and work with them on strategy and briefing in particular, and asking loads and loads of questions. So I'm definitely a question asker. Really excited to be here. Thanks very much, Anne.
Fabulous. Thank you, Rebecca. And over to you, Michael Fuhrmann.
Yeah, hello, everyone. My name is Michael Fuhrmann. I joined DoubleVerify 6 months ago as country manager for Germany, for the DACH region. I worked in digital advertising before. So, for example, for DoubleClick and most recently for Google. I'm very excited to be here.
And last but not least, Arne Kirchum, if I can ask you to close out the intros.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Anna, and hello to everybody. Really happy to be on this panel. Yes, my name is Arne Kirchum. I'm working for Unilever actually already since 34 years. I'm the media director responsible for the DACH region, which is Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, and for the Nordics, so Scandinavia. And as you can imagine from our brand suitability is really at the bottom of my heart. So really looking forward to the discussion. Back to you, Anne.
Great. Thank you very much. Well, let's just get straight to the heart of the matter. I'd like to ask, the first question I'd like to ask, and I've been fascinated myself by some of our previous discussions around this, but what's the most common and successful steps, in your opinion, that a brand can take to ensure it exercises a sound brand suitability strategy? Rebecca, could you kick us off with that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think for us, it's about building it from the very beginning, right? So really getting to the heart of what the brand stands for and of course, what it doesn't stand for. Personality, tone of voice, strategic vision, all of those sort of really big ticket items. When you get clear on those, it makes a suitability strategy much easier to create. So I think if you are kind of super clear on who you are and what you're trying to achieve, it's a lot easier to articulate what content and what environments are going to be suitable for the brand. So for me, that really has to be step one. If you don't get that right at the beginning, it's going to create loads of hassle later on. So that would definitely be mine.
Anna, I think you've got some things you wanted to add to that as well. Oh, I think, can we just get you off mute?
Sorry. Yes, that's a common mistake. Even after 2 years of pandemic, it will not go out. It's become common bad habit. Sorry for it. So building on what Rebecca just said, from a Unilever point of view, we really believe that every brand should be led by its own purpose. And actually, this purpose will define what suitability means, and it goes far beyond brand safety, I think. A brand like Ben & Jerry, for example, is taking a clear stand regarding climate change and also on other issues like equal sex marriage. And then it becomes clear what is the context, what are the areas where this brand should appear and where it doesn't fit. Actually, that is, and you need to really have this in your genes at the end of the day as a media person, but also as a brand person, to define what is suitable and what is not.
So you just alluded to that as well, the journey from brand safety through to brand suitability. Are brands actually making that distinction now? I mean, there are core differences, subtle, or some may say subtle differences, but are they actually making that distinction as they develop the media strategies? And if so, how's that actually impacting the campaigns? What work are you seeing that's really driving home that broader picture of brand suitability? Rebecca, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think in answer to the first sort of part of your question, I think yes, they are making a distinction, but more and more, both safety and suitability are becoming necessities, right? They're becoming absolute sort of must-haves for brands as both areas evolve. And as both areas evolve, there is quite a lot of overlap, like you say. There is quite a lot of kind of blending of the two. So yes, that brands are making distinction, but actually the two go hand in hand, so much so that the distinction is less important between them versus what actually kind of making the right choices and doing the right thing for the brand, right? So I think our brand safety guidelines continue to evolve that we work on with our clients. And they encompass more things beyond sort of just the legal, avoiding porn, for example. They encompass things like privacy ethics, fraud detection, viewability, on top of the kind of no porn, no terrorism stuff, right? And brand suitability is really an extension of that, and is much more kind of brand specific, but certainly viewed as kind of equally necessary. So yes, they are making a distinction, but less so in terms of choosing one or the other, because they need both.
Yeah, I like the idea of the blending piece that you've alluded to. I think that's really super important. Michael, can you add anything to that? Is there anything you wanted to add into that?
Yes, I think when we talk about this concept a lot with our clients, with brands, and I fully agree. I think you have the brand safety part, and this refers to content that absolutely no brands wants to be associated with. For example, pornography, terrorism, how do I build my own crack pipe, or whatever. No one wants to advertise there. So that's very clear. But there is all the other content, and I think Arne made a very good point. The brand basically has to individually decide which content is appropriate for a brand, where do I want to advertise and where not. So there is no good and bad. So for example, let's say a company that produces gardening furniture or something, maybe they do not want to be around content about seasonal allergies, for example. But for a home furniture companies, that might be completely okay and appropriate. And I think it's, our approach is basically that we give the advertiser and the agency the choice to define those categories in our software, and basically align it to their brand strategy around values and sensitivities. And maybe one more point to add. When you look at the brand suitability piece, then it's also, it's not only about appropriate and inappropriate content. It's also about that a brand may find out that some content works better for them in terms of driving the return on invest, and other contents do not work so well. So that's also something where you can basically build your own strategy and improve the return on invest of your media spend.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. I'm sort of old school, and for me, I look at brand suitability and I just go, well, it's just contextual targeting, isn't it? I mean, put me right. Is that the case or not? Rebecca, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think yes, in the past it has been, right? It has been very much about contextual. I think though that just like how brand safety has kind of evolved into privacy ethics, brand suitability has evolved as well, right? So there is a lot that is about contextual relevance. And Michael said, about the kind of the furniture brands and that kind of stuff. There is a lot about that. But it has developed so that instead of looking at kind of broad exclusions like politics, for example, we can now use pre-bid semantic analysis to kind of determine how brands actually lean in. I think that's really, really important because younger generations especially are sort of demanding that brands take a stance, right, and take a stand. And Anna was talking about the Ben and Jerry's, for example. So politics and social causes can be really tricky, and there can be blowback for getting it wrong. But again, if you block off kind of a whole, politics as a kind of block wholesale, you also run the risk of being irrelevant. So the developments in semantics have been fantastic and will kind of allow us to sail closer to the wind. But they're not the only sort of side of brand suitability, right? Because there's a whole other part of it around conscientious media practices. So making sure that our buying practices are inclusive and responsible as well, and understanding and knowing what our ad dollars are funding. And I think that is key in an area, in a sort of space where trust is very fragile, and consumers are demanding and having access to much more kind of transparency and information. So I think, yes, it is, in answer to your question, it's a bit of a long way, but yes, it is still a lot about context, but it has evolved beyond that to being responsible and behaviors as well.
Yeah, I think it's important, to be expansive in that answer, because it is, a challenging thought as you think about how brands, and I really liked your comment around brands sailing closer to the wind. It is being the previous path that brands used to take, just saying, okay, this is fine, this is what we don't do. Actually saying, what can we do? How do we lean in? How do we sail close to the wind? How do we really stand out in that context is really crucial. And I think that from my own personal point, using brand suitability actually pushes you as a brand to think so much more expansively about where and how you can, and be more creative about that. So it pulls things back into that. And do you want to add anything, or Anne or Michael? Would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah.
Maybe. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, yes, go ahead.
No, okay. So just want to add, I think it's looking on the whole thing from two different angles. So contextual targeting versus brand suitability is actually asking two different questions from my point of view. Yeah, if you go for contextual targeting, you look at, okay, where are my target consumers? Where can I find them? And you look from, okay, they're probably interested. If you go for DAF, they're probably interested in anything around beauty. But then, if you go for brand suitability, you would think, okay, what would be the environment? What would be the context where my consumer would expect my brand? And that can lead to a different answer. So it may be the same response at the end, but it's two different questions, and you may end up elsewhere. And as Rebecca just said, it becomes more challenging for brands to answer the questions to brand suitability than just contextual targeting.
That's
Michael.
that's a great answer. I think it's that's really super helpful, because again, you're just pushing everybody, and hopefully everybody listening into that, it's just pushing you to think just think a little bit more keenly about how a brand is going to work in those different environments. So I think we've just touched on some things, around harmful content, which is to do with the brand safety aspect and brand's reputation. And we know that the downside of that and how harmful that is, and we've certainly seen enough surveys that demonstrate what happens if you're not in the right place and your reputation is damaged as a result of that. But what's the upside of the positive impact of relevance? How is that relevance going to be measured? I'm never sure that we actually get right into that enough in actually measuring that side of it of relevance, or being really clear about what the impact of being in the right place at the right time is. Rebecca, do you mind kicking us off?
Do you know what? Actually, I was going to say, I know Michael has some really interesting stats on this, because I've heard him talk about the stats before. So I'm going to actually deflect slightly and give the floor to Michael on this one first.
Perfect.
He's got the good stats.
Yes, thank you very much. So yes, basically, I think context is really key when it comes to relevance. And our marketing departments, they do regular research studies to measure exactly the impact. And I will just look up the exact numbers now. So 69% of the consumers are more likely to view an ad if it's next to contextually relevant content. And 44% of consumers say that they have tried a new brand after viewing it alongside relevant content. So that's basically, that comes out of our study. And I think it clearly shows how relevant the right context is. And maybe just to add to your previous question, if context is a new concept or it's an old concept. So basically, I remember when I started my first job after university, I worked for Gruner & Jahr, which is the publishing house, the publishing arm of Bertelsmann. And so it's 25 years ago. But, at this time, there was a Stern magazine. They also made like theme specials. Like, for example, they would have like an automotive special, like every quarter. And of course, why did they do it? Because they wanted to attract automotive brands. I mean, it was already a kind of, contextual advertising. Or in television, if you wanted to reach a male demography, then you would show an ad in football, basically. So the concept of contextual advertising, it's not new at all. But I would like to point out that the technology that we have now today has nothing to do with the contextual advertising of the past. Especially through semantic science and machine learning, we can we achieve now a granularity and scalability of contextual targeting that is really new, and it keeps still developing. So there's a lot of progress in machine learning, so we will get better and better. And if you create your segments, your contextual segments, this can be very, very bespoke and detailed, varying from brand advertiser to brand advertiser. And automatically, new sites that work very well or new content is added automatically. So you do not need to touch it anymore. So I think we really made a lot of progress with contextual advertising, and we continue to make a lot of progress. And maybe one last point, which I think is also important to understand why contextual advertising is getting more important. We all know that the third-party cookie will go away, the decline of the third-party cookie. And I think that the industry is trying to find answers. How can we replace the third-party cookie? How can we measure the return of invest in media spend? And I think that contextual targeting, is definitely one possible solution for this. I'm not saying it's the only one, but I definitely think it's a very privacy-friendly alternative to the third-party cookie.
Yes, yeah, that certainly is an area that has been talked about extensively, I think, just recently because of the third-party cookie. But Michael, I just want to hold it with you for one moment, because I think you've obviously talked about the success that's been happening. And I know that you've also done some work in terms of how the violation rates are falling year on year with regard to brand suitability and where it's actually where brands are appearing and shouldn't be appearing, and how that's been managed over time. So why do you think we're seeing this decrease? What's happening? What's getting better?
Yeah, so I think we saw a decrease this year of 4% compared to last year. And I think the main reason for this is that if brands use basically software or tools to help them with brand suitability, brand safety, the measurement and the blocking of ads is only one part of it. But you also have the pre-bid solution, basically. So if our software is basically integrated in all common DSPs like DV360, TradeRisk, and so on. And if a brand knows that a certain content violates my brand safety settings, then I can use the pre-bid solutions, and I do not bid on this kind of content anymore. And this basically brings down the violation rate, and it will continue to fall. I think the 4% was basically from the number from last year, and this year we see, I think, already 12% of reduction in violation rates.
That's excellent. So it's great to see. I mean, we're definitely, those things are good, because obviously they're always going to be good if we're moving in the right direction, aren't they? So that's great. That sort of brings me on to, the thoughts that we might have around platforms and how they're actually categorizing content. I mean, to be blunt, are we actually seeing any game changers there? Are we seeing better categorization of content? And, what, and if you are, what would you consider to be a game changer in that area of categorization of content on the platforms? Rebecca, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I mean, I think for us, there are a few platforms where we have we've worked with partners. One of the ones that we are looking at the moment is around Channel Factory's sort of YouTube recategorization and their the way that they work on YouTube. In terms of game changers, I know Arne had some thoughts on some stuff that they've been working on at Unilever. Actually, did you have some thoughts on that, Arne? I think that I heard you.
Well, at least I think I'm not sure if I would call it game changers, because that's a big word, but I think platforms really have listened to advertisers, and I think that also due a little bit to the GARM initiative, which you're probably all aware of, which made platforms like YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter to release content policies and really look on what the content on their platforms are. I mean, they have also changed the ways of working to understand what the content is, to group the content. And I think that's one point also Michael has mentioned. Technology has made a real step forward, a lot of progress we see here, and I think that's the reason why we see these great reduction rates. Having said this, I think it's an endless game, and probably all aware what happened for Twitch with these bots. So even if you do all your homework, things happen which you have not imagined before, and you're never on the safe side. So I think it's something where you have to work all the time, because at the moment where you think you are there, something else is emerging.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think every time we find a new partner or a new platform or new technology, the landscape shifts again, and we're constantly kind of having to rethink things. So I think the key, like Arne says, is kind of to keep your ear to the ground pretty much all the time. Which is why I'm very lucky as a generalist, as a strategist, to work with specialists in the digital space, so that they're kind of immersed in it all of the time. Certainly.
Do you think this, we alluded to this at the beginning of the at the top of the panel conversation. Do you where brands are being more keenly aware of where they're being placed and pushing the boundaries a bit more, and working more closely with different levels of content and thinking about what that's going to say about their brand, whether that be the moral stance they're taking or whatever, or whether it's which means that they may be in a political position or not. is this ultimately going to improve, this is a personal topic of mine actually, improve the plurality of media and at the same time improve the quality of media? Is it possible this could help drive better media opportunities and be, there's more symbiotic relationship between brands being in the right place and having, and supporting the right media? I mean, I open that to anybody who'd like to take that one.
It's a big one. I mean, I think so. I think that the more we weave in kind of that idea of conscientious media and conscientious media planning and buying into brand suitability, the more it feeds the funnel, and it's kind of a sort of a cycle of good, right? So we are funding more the right sources of information, and also at the same time defunding the sources where there's going to be more hate, misinformation, fake news, and that kind of stuff. And I think that's really, really important, that as brands and advertisers and media agencies, we have a responsibility to kind of leave the landscape better than we found it. So, yes.
Fully agree with you, Rebecca. And also, I think what we see is, and that is being also in the area for such a long time, is it's a new experience for me. We can be a force for good. We can really drive things, because the power of the media money cannot just be to increase the return on investment for our shareholders, but also to drive things in the media area. I mean, it also lands with some responsibility, of course, and you should not overdo it. You have, I mean, at some areas you have to think. But for one example, we're also in the areas of toilet cleaners, and you wouldn't really think, okay, where is here the real area? But yeah, you think about Germany. Now you start thinking about schools in Eastern Europe, where hygiene is an issue. You think about India. We have a big business in India where toilet and clean water is a real issue. And by the way, rural people don't have a toilet at all. They go to the fields where they can easily be killed by wild animals. Yeah, it's really dangerous. So building up toilets can be a purpose. But there is a responsibility with driving these media, and you should not overdo it.
Great, thank you. No, that's powerful thoughts for sure. We're coming towards the end of the panel. I'd like to close out on one question, which is going to be looking towards the future. Do you we've alluded to the fact that this is a finely tuned environment. It's a balancing act. It's trying to move the brands into different spaces. It's trying to widen the conversation that the brand might be having about what it is and what it does and who it's doing, where it's supposed to be, and how what it's supposed to be messaging to its audience. So, do you think we're going to see a ever more increasing, finely tuned set of controls to protect brands as we go forwards? The pandemic, the polarization of the political piece, the social justice issues. Are they going to? Is that going to be more broader in its context in relation to brands? Are we going to see brands entering into these fields into a bigger place? Who would like to open that one?
I mean,
I think I'd like everybody to just close out on this. So if we can all have say something on it, it'd be great.
I think for me, the speed of culture kind of moves faster and faster, right? And as it does so, consumers expect brands not only to keep up, but also, as we've all sort of alluded to, kind of be very vocal on the changing social issues of the time. And I think younger consumers expect that greater degree of transparency and outspokenness from brands, and I think that trend is only going to increase and become faster and bigger. I think younger consumers are also, more likely to seek out brands who fit in with their socio-political leanings, and have brands who kind of match up with their thoughts and feelings on social issues. So I think in order to connect with those consumers, brands have got to be relevant. Sailing close to the wind is just going to be more and more necessary. So, vanilla is safe, but it doesn't get you closer to the consumers that your future brand is going to need, right? So I think having tools and tech that is going to enable brands to achieve safety and suitability in a fast changing environment at the speed of culture is absolutely going to be part of the future.
Great.
One
Mikhail.
short sentence to, oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, yeah,
Yes.
go on. No, on, go for it, go for it.
Okay, a short sentence, just make sure that our technology does not eat up courage. If brands wants to lean in, you need to take some risks.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good point, because it's our vision for the future, and our mission is really to empower the brands to exactly do this. So you have basically one setting for all kind of advertising that is delivered through the internet protocol. And the brands can work on the strategy, and basically we, with our software, we take out as much of the complexity and rely on machine learning, semantic science, and so on to make this possible.
Great, thank you guys. That's been a super discussion, and I really appreciate the time you've added to this. I think we're coming to the end of our allotted time, although I haven't actually seen any notes coming up on the screen to say we are, so it may be possible that we still have a little bit more time left to talk, in which case I'm going to just one other area which we didn't touch on so far, is the whole challenge of applying brand safety and suitability across multi-channel media buys. We haven't actually looked at that as yet, and that might be an area that I think the audience will find really value your opinions so far on that side of it. So Anna, do you want to just kick that off, talking about the whole multi-channel media buy and what that presents for brand suitability?
Yeah. Actually, this makes life, of course, very complex and not easier, because brand suitability, as we just discussed, is not the same on each channel. If you go on a social media platform, it's a different thing as if you go on traditional TV, if you are on connected TV, or if you are on search. That's the first thing. The second thing is technologies also becomes more complex, and Michael already said there are more and more solutions, but nevertheless you have to be a kind of circus artist to get this all organized around you, and you need technical experts. And as I'm also sitting on the board of advertisers in Germany, I mean the big global players, they can of course hire the experts, but if you're a smaller advertiser, it's getting quite hard for you to run all this. And I think this is so multi-channel with all the different areas and what can occur. I mentioned the point of Twitch, where the environment is completely different, for example, or Amazon, where you have probably a very controlled area if you're just on the selling side. Yeah. So this is a lot of challenges.
Rebecca,
I mean, like Anna said, one size isn't going to fit all, right? So I think for us, when we are planning and creating strategies, the best approach is sort of a tailored consistency, right? So you need a consistent strategy, but one that's flexible enough that you can kind of maximize the opportunities afforded by the different platforms. So, in social, you might have bigger issues around fake news, and you might need tighter controls around that. Whereas if you're working with CNN, it might not be so much of an issue. Both of those kind of methodologies, both of those approaches can live under one consistent strategy. So I think that's the key, is to have really understand and get to the heart of your kind of your reason for being and what you're trying to achieve, and then being able to be flexible enough to tailor that for the specific platforms that you're on to really maximize those opportunities.
And then obviously we haven't really, one area of multi-platform which we haven't necessarily zoned in on, but I think is particularly challenging, is CTV. So transparency in that space is critical, but how can the risks actually be reduced in that space? Anna, do you have some thoughts on that? I think we discussed that previously, didn't we? You had some ideas around that area.
Yeah, definitely. So I think in principle you have the same rules, of course, as elsewhere. But I think on CTV, normally with given the vendor structure, depends of course on the markets. Given the vendor structures, currently you talk more about private deals, and with private deals, of course, you have more possibilities to agree and set the rules and be in control of what's happened and where it happens.
And Mikhail, do you want to just close out on that? Because I think, again, DoubleVerify have some introduced you some interesting tools around that area, which I think would be something for to leave the audience with.
So we see a lot of growth coming out of CTV because brands are following the consumers, and the consumers are using CTV increasingly. So we made sure basically that our brand safety categories also work on CTV as on the open web or in social, for example. So it's also for us it's a very, very important growth area.
Fantastic, thank you. Well, I'm really pleased we actually had that extra time there that enabled us to launch into that multi-channel space, because I think it's really important, and it's definitely a challenging area to try and get that balance right. But it still talks back to the still with so much of this, we go back into the fundamentals of brands management and what brands are. But I do like the fact that we have this opportunity for brands to take stances, to be more, to be more considered about what positions they're taking, and therefore, as a result of that positioning, what their how that proposition that the brand is trying to expand on and to build out and to add value to its existence, I think is super important. And I like the idea of being able to, obviously from ex-BBC, to see the opportunity for that plurality of media to be enhanced by brands working symbiotically with media to grow that environment. So Rob, I think you're back on with us, so I'd like to hand back to you to help us close out.
And we're right back in the newsroom, right?
No.
We never lose that muscle. We never lose that muscle. And I got my second cup of coffee, so I'm ready to go for the day. A couple of questions came in, before I let you all go. A couple of questions came in from the audience that I want to share if we have a couple of minutes before the break. The one question is, and it's an interesting one. In the super fast news world, what is the? I'm editorializing the question a little bit here, but the question is, what is the shelf life of a communications error? How quickly do consumers forget a suitability mistake? Is it 6 months? Is it a year? How do you think? The internet lives forever, but what is the shelf life of a communications error if somebody positions something incorrectly? Anyone?
I think it depends a bit on how strong the impact was. I have seen examples in my career, and I beg you not to be forced to quote them directly, where I got feedback after 2 or 3 years from some consumers who still remembered how unbelievable bad it was from the brand to do this. So it really depends. And today, consumers have the platforms to really spread their opinion to everywhere.
Yeah, so it definitely has a long shelf life. So be careful. This stuff has impact. Let's cut it there. I think that's important. That's kind of an important ending point here, is that all that we're working towards, consumers do remember. And if, so we have to get this right. Thank you, Anne, for being a great host. Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you to DoubleVerify for producing this session. Really great stuff and really important. And have a great rest of the day, everyone.